Today we're doing a quick overview of the installer monitoring login. Starting at our website, solmax.com, we go up to monitoring in the upper right corner. There it goes. Took a minute to load there. So we get into inverter monitoring, and you'll notice there's two buttons below here, installer monitoring and end user monitoring. Today we're going to go to installer monitoring. This is what gives you full control of programming the inverter, updating firmware, basically all the stuff you'll have to do to set it up. To get an installer login, you'll want to contact your distributor that you typically buy inverters from, or you can contact Midnight Power directly if your distributor can't set you up, but your distributor should be able to set you up. I click on installer monitoring and it brings up this window right here. We're going to enter our username and password and log in. And you'll see we get a list of all of the installs we've done, sorted by the end user. If we want to go look and see what one of those is doing, click on the name, and then we bring up the inverter here. In this case, it's only one inverter for this end user. Click on operation, and that brings us into our main control panel. You'll see initially it shows us the serial number, some basic specs of it. The last time it was updated online on the server, that's something you want to check to make sure it's updating regularly. Every 5 minutes it should update on the server. We've got, we'll go back to this basic operation here, but scrolling down we've got our device details under information. Again, serial number. Not sure why it's not showing the internal temperature right now, but we've got status, what work mode we've got it in, the firmware versions, how much solar we've got on each of our 3 MPPTs right now, total power. Yeah, it's missing a couple things that haven't updated on the server correctly today, but normally we would see our battery current, voltage, and charging power, state of charge, what's going on with the battery. We can also see the firmware version of the battery and the total capacity. And scrolling down farther, we can see what's going on with the grid. In this case, we're selling on both legs to the grid, about 2.4, 2.5 kilowatts right now. What is our normal load? How much we've got on the generator port. In this case, the generator is not running, so we got 0 volts. What is our AC output to the load? Right now there's no load on site for this one. It's just exporting everything to the grid. Our smart loads, what the load is there. Other smart load. Smart load 1 doesn't show up on this one because it's set as the generator port, but if we hadn't programmed that as the generator port, that would show up as smart load 1 and we'd be able to see what it's doing. And that's kind of the stuff we see underneath the information. If we go to chart, that's what I often look at to kind of see what is the system doing. And we see a chart for today. See solar's picking up there. We charged the batteries a little bit in the morning, and then we just started selling to the grid because we don't have hardly any local loads. A little blip right there. We can also go to different days. We want to see what it did yesterday. See, we sold for most of the day. The solar had a couple big clouds go by. Battery stayed a charge. Mostly good for most of the day. This one's set basically to just sell to the grid and be backup power, so there's not a whole lot going on. If we go to month, you can kind of see our production and consumption, how much is going to the grid, how much it's drawing from the grid for each day of the month, and then year. Oh, I remember this one hasn't been online properly for a while, so it's not showing correctly, but typically you'll see for each month how much production, consumption, and sold to the grid, bought from the grid there. If we go to log, that shows us what kinds of faults and warnings we've had in the past. Current alerts shows us if there's any alerts right now, and then shutdown log will specifically show if it had any shutdowns, what caused that. Under information, if we hit download, that'll download a CSV file of the information for the day in this box right here, and we can do other things with that. There's another video on a post-processing spreadsheet that can make a little better use of that CSV file. Under basic operation, that's where we do a lot of stuff. We've got our remote setting, and this is all of our settings for the inverter. Power control, we can set all of this stuff. Self-consumption mode, our CT sensors are set up, maximum feed-in power, whether we're doing zero export, supporting normal load, etc. We also have our time-based controls here. We have our smart load controls for the generator and other smart loads. We can put the generator on the AC input instead of the AC smart load 1. Battery settings. One thing with all of these is you'll want to scroll down to the bottom and hit read, and that pulls the current data off the inverter for what the settings are. Otherwise, it may remember the last time you were in that inverter, and if it's been changed locally or through the app in between, the portal may not show correctly. So you want to click read before you start changing any of these settings, and then once you're done changing them on each page, hit upload to upload the new settings to the inverter. We've got general. Only one we usually ever touch in here is the parallel mode if we're doing multiple inverters. Other than that, just keeping all those defaults. Grid settings for our grid code and all of the boot up and connection ones. Generally, we don't touch any of those except if our first boot we change that to 10 seconds instead of 300 seconds. Otherwise, it takes 5 minutes to turn on when it has to count down from 300 seconds. Equipment maintenance, that's where we've got our on and off to put it in standby, and also reset it to factory defaults or clear all data. If we're doing a firmware update, sometimes we'll do that, and also there's some cases if it's just really confused and needs its memory reset, but we don't use those too often. Upgrade device, that's a common one we use. If we click on that, it'll give us a list of what the current firmware is for the master DSP, slave DSP, CSB, and the battery BMS. In this case, those are all up to date. But if we wanted to update those, first we need to make sure the inverter is in standby. And then we click down here and we can pick updating each of these files as needed. And it'll show progress line going through and then update the description of which firmware it is. So that's where we do our firmware updates. We can also do firmware updates through the batch firmware upgrade, but I find it better to just do it through this upgrade device button here. Command communication is for certain programming things that have to be done with an actual command line. There's not too many of those. Contact support if you run into anything that you're having trouble programming, and if it is one of those special ones, they'll let you know what the command line stuff is. We also have our account settings where we can change our password, and then basic settings like the email and time zone, things like that. Setting the time zone is important to make it show correctly on the graphs and the timing. We've got end user management. That's where we can go see all of our end users as an installer. And If we scroll down to the bottom, we've got create end user, and if we select one of these, we can delete the end user or assign the end user to a sub operator. A sub operator could be if you have a bunch of different, say, installers working for you as a higher level installer, you can set each of them up with an installer account and then assign certain jobs to each one so they can see just the ones that they've installed, but not all of them. And that's basically it for the installer login to the service portal.